Hi, welcome to today's Career Exploration Program. We're glad to have you with us. Today's topic, we're going to focus on the fields of science and research. For those of you I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Dr. Jo Tuitt, and I'm going to be your host today. We have an incredible expert panel with us today, and they're going to share with you information about their individual college pathways, their careers, up and coming opportunities that exist within their fields, and so much more. And one of the things I absolutely love about this program is that you get to ask questions of the experts. So as they're introducing themselves, be thinking about those questions. You're going to drop those into the chat box, and you can either drop those to me privately or to everybody in the group, and I'll make sure to present them to the panel. And if you're watching this on social media, just drop those questions in the comments, or you can email them to me at the email address you see there on my screen nameplate, and we'll be sure to get those questions answered for you. So what do you say? Let's start off with some introductions. Gretchen, would you mind starting us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Gretchen. I graduated from the Academy in 2017. And after I graduated, I went on to the University of Notre Dame, where I graduated in biology, and I graduated with biology bachelor's of science in 2021. And following that, I took a gap year because I was really interested in both research and veterinary, and I couldn't really decide between the two. So I decided to do a gap year and work as a laboratory technician, where I gained a lot of experience of working in a lab environment. And then through that experience, I kind of stumbled into a master's also at the University of Notre Dame, where I was paid as a master's student, which was fantastic. And I got to do really exciting research on yellow baboons in Kenya, which was awesome. I got to go out there for free. It was an amazing experience. I just graduated with that actually like a couple weeks ago, which is really exciting. And I will be attending the veterinary school at Western University in Pomona, California this fall. So I'm really excited to move on to veterinary afterwards.
Who wants to jump in next?
I can go next. So my name's Kaylee Bender. I also graduated from the Academy in 2017. So Gretchen and I were in the same class, and we've actually been friends since then, along with the rest of our little group that still gets together. So after I went to the Academy, I went to Ball State. So I wasn't really sure what I wanted, but I started off pre-med because I knew I wanted to go into science. And in my mind, science equaled being a doctor. So I started off pre-med in biology, and then eventually decided I actually really loved organic chemistry. So I did research in organic chemistry as an undergrad, and then ended up finishing with a bachelor's in biology and a bachelor's in chemistry. And then because I fell in love with chemistry, I ended up stopping the whole process of applying to med school that I was in the middle of after I'd taken the MCAT and everything, changed my mind and finished off more chemistry classes and research, applied to grad school, so for a PhD in chemistry, which is where I am now. So I got into my dream school of University of California in Davis, and now I'm studying MALDI, mass spectrometry imaging. So I'm doing one project in cancer research and one project in spine development. So looking at spina bifida and then eventually multiple sclerosis. So a lot of disease application in chemistry. So kind of a good pairing of everything I loved before kind of rolled into one thing. And ended up living in California, which was my other dream. So now Gretchen and I will both be finally in the same time zone again, and actually in the same state. Our friend group has been spread over all 4 time zones for kind of a little while now. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Wes, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. So my name's Wes Gaughan. I graduated from Academy back in 2000. After that, I went to IU for physics. Did a lot of undergrad research there in nuclear physics, cyclotron facility as they did back then. So I worked there a lot and decided wanted to keep doing that. So I went and did a PhD in nuclear physics at University of Connecticut, and then a postdoc at University of Kentucky. So between those, that spanned quite a long time. I worked on a lot of different nuclear and particle physics experiments. I worked at some big U.S. national labs like Jefferson Lab in Virginia and Fermi Lab, which is up by Chicago. And then I also got to work at some labs in Switzerland and Japan, and a lot of different experiments, different places, but all in sort of fundamental nuclear physics research. Then after that, for the past 5 years, I've worked for Siemens Healthineers as an industry scientist. So still, I'm doing a lot of the same kind of nuclear physics, but instead of fundamental research, I'm working more on applications of that to medical science, particular medical imaging using nuclear physics methods.
Thanks, Wes. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I guess, sorry. I guess, so after the academy, I went to Butler because I had no idea where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do, and Butler let me in, so great. Got my undergraduate degree in biology there. Did one advantage of a small school like that is I was able to get in on doing some research while I was a freshman. Spent about 6 months at Oxford University in the UK on a scholarship program. Got my first publication when I was 19. After Butler, fully intended to join the Army and drive tanks, but that is just not what happened. I ended up going to get my master's degree in genetics at Penn State University, which immediately following that, I did join the Army, but they didn't let me drive tanks. They threw me into what's called a research microbiologist position. So we do have those. There's only about 50 of them at any given point in time, but they do exist. So I spent my first several years working on HIV and malaria vaccines at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. And then I got my PhD in comparative and experimental medicine at the University of Tennessee as a requirement of my career progression in the Army. Then I came back and was the department chief for genomics at the USAMRIID, which is the U.S. Army Research Institute for Infectious Diseases, working on chem biodefense. And then small snafu with an injury, and I got medically retired. So now I am currently a senior staff at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab.
Thank you, Matt. Let's see, Stephen. I don't think I called you earlier, did I?
No.
Okay, all right.
So I'm Dr. Stephen Toller. I work at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Department of Energy Laboratory. It's, I believe, the largest by employees at this point. Have to give the disclaimer, nothing I say today is the view of the government or my employer. It's all my personal view. It's required. I gotta say it. So I graduated from the Indiana Academy in 2009, then went to Purdue University where I got a bachelor's in nuclear engineering, then went to the University of Michigan for a master's and PhD in nuclear engineering and radiological sciences. And the decade of my career so far has been, how does radiation change the core and structural materials for nuclear power plants? Specifically looking at steels and similar materials that kind of make up the base, most of the actual plant, and how those high temperatures, high radiation environments change their properties. So it's been a really interesting field.
Sounds very interesting. Thank you, Stephen. Let's see, Brooke, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Wonderful to have y'all joining us this morning. This is great this afternoon. This is really awesome to see so many faces. My name's Brooke Van Horn. I'm actually an associate professor at the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina. I joined here in 2010 and I do research on polymer chemistry. I graduated from the academy in some of the first few classes. I was from 1996. I got to meet Jo when she was very much in the early stages of her time there as well. So we both have, aged as a part of that, but gracefully, I'd say, Jo, for both of us, hopefully. Yeah, exactly. So I went to IU for undergrad, and I wasn't sure. I knew it was science that I wanted to do, but wasn't sure what path. And like many of you, I was thinking pre-med, so I declared biochemistry. And I found out I really love math and I really love physics. So I graduated with a BS in biochem, but I also have a BS in physics. And it was actually my physics faculty at IU that got me connected in 2000 with a set of researchers at the IBM Almaden facility in San Jose, California. And that's where I learned about polymers. And I really get now to integrate together the idea of biochem, organic chemistry, physics, technology, all of it together. And it's pretty darn fantastic to be able to do that. But that path, that year and a half actually after I graduated from undergrad, I spent 18 months out at the IBM facility learning things, and did my PhD at Washington University in St. Louis, funny enough, in organic chemistry, which I did not enjoy as a student in college, but I found I absolutely love now. And that enriched my teaching experience and knowledge. And so my postdoc was actually at Princeton in a chemical engineering department, because lots of materials are made in those departments and I wanted to learn how to study them. But it was a research and teaching position. And so I was set up to be, hopefully, a successful faculty member after having done those kinds of things. So I met my husband when I was in grad school, took a little journey on the way of a couple of years trying to end up in one place. But we both ended up at the College of Charleston, and he's also a chemistry faculty member, but he plays with lasers and does physical chemistry. And lucky for me, he studies some of the things that we make in my lab. So it's a pretty awesome collaboration between the two of us. And I know that there are other folks on here that are going to chat about this, but if there are any of you that want to reach out about college experiences where we've all been, I suggest you reach out to us, because we definitely still have people in our networks that we might be able to connect you to. So thank you so much for letting me join this show.
Thank you for joining us. And last but certainly not least, Sierra, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name's Sierra. I graduated from the Academy in 2016. During my time at the Academy, I actually didn't know that I wanted to study science, and I took advantage of the foreign language opportunities and music classes at Ball State. And then I entered uh, Indiana University, majoring in music and Arabic. But about in my third year of college, I got really interested in neuroscience, added a major, and I graduated from IU with degrees in Arabic and neuroscience. Um, I did a lot of research in my last 3 years of college as an undergrad and got a publication, and then I worked as a research assistant in cannabinoid pharmacology for a year, where I got 2 more publications. And now I am a graduate student in the neurosciences PhD program at University of California, San Diego. So there's several of us out here, California. Yeah, and I hope to be a professor of computational neuroscience in the future.
Thank you all so much for those introductions. Let's go ahead and open this up for questions. As a reminder to those that are here in the Zoom room with us, if you have a question, just drop it in the chat box. You can either drop that to me as a private message or to everyone in the group. And if you're watching this on social media, just drop that question into the comments, or you can email it to me. And my email address is there on my nameplate on the screen. So I would be happy to answer those questions or get those questions answered if you want to email them to me too. All right. So I know that nobody ever wants to be first with a question. So I'm going to actually pose one that was pre-submitted by a student that couldn't attend. So as I'm asking this question, go ahead and drop yours into the chat box. So question for each one of you here is, how did you choose your field and what attracted you to it?
Okay, so there's 2 ways you can approach this. The first is that I really loved physics and wanted to go into something kind of on the fundamental science side. But then after a conversation with Steve Shu, who I think is still there, he said having the title of engineer means you'll at least get paid more. So I ended up picking kind of that mixture of physics and engineering that is nuclear engineering. And that's kind of how I went down my path.
Yeah, it's funny. So my story is very similar, except that I think when I started the academy, I was really set on going into astronomy. Um, and I had an astronomy professor at the academy who isn't alive anymore, but he said you should go get a degree in physics because you'll make way more money. So I did that.
When I went to the academy, I was rather interested in becoming an engineer as well because I had really enjoyed like math classes prior. And then at the academy, I realized I enjoyed my math classes way less than like my biology classes. And I kind of circled back to like when I was a kid, I was obsessed with animals. I still am, of course. And so I kind of circled back to that interest like my at the end of my senior year. And Dr. Kallmeyer, who I hope is still at the academy, I imagine, I don't know if she is, but she was fantastic. She taught zoology and she really like amplified my interests. And so going into college, I really dove into that. And it was great to pick up, like, I picked up a minor in German because I love foreign languages as well. So I tried to explore as much as I could, but I circled back to like my childhood interests.
Yeah, I feel like it's really important to pay attention to what classes you enjoy, to take a wide array of classes and then really pay attention to the ones that you feel like you gravitate toward them. And I think it's oftentimes people maybe make you feel pressure to just pick something and stick to it, but I think it's really important to explore and just see what really excites you.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. While I was at IU, I actually thought initially, because this was in the Genentech boom, that I really wanted to go into genetics, which was one of the areas of biology and medicine that I initially thought would be so interesting. And I worked in a fruit fly lab at IU. And I found out quickly, even though I gave it 2 full summers of research, that I did not like the smell of agar. And it was beautiful to do chemistry like on, or do science on paper with that, but I didn't like the biology experience part of it. And it had nothing to do with the faculty member. He was amazing. I worked with Tom Kaufman there. He was fantastic and his whole lab was, but I just realized that wasn't where my passion was. And it was the great mentorship that I had at IBM and that then led me to both my grad advisor at WashU, Karen Woolley, who's now SEC Professor of the Year last year at Texas A&M, and also the faculty that I had at Princeton in engineering there as well, Richard Register. They were all fantastic mentors. So don't be afraid of trying something and realizing it's okay to say that's not what I want to do, and then just try to find that thing that will ignite that passion for you.
So I guess at the academy, I always knew that I was interested in biology in some realm and had some really good classes there. But then when I went to Ball State and started actually doing all of the requirements for pre-med, I was required to do chemistry. And that was always the fun part of my day. So over time, I eventually realized this could be a career too. So I kind of looked at all my options, tried a bunch of different biology and chemistry classes. And one day, a professor who is still someone I communicate with actually pulled me aside in lab when he found out I had a med school interview, and he asked me why I wasn't in chemistry. He was like, I think you need to reconsider and think about this for a minute because I think you're meant to be a chemist. And so it took me a while to actually get that and think about it. But after another year or so, I was done with biology class or done with chemistry classes, finishing up my biology degree with just the minor in chemistry at that point, and realized every day I missed it when I walked by those labs. So I extended my time, ended up doing 5 years for undergrad, doing the 2 degrees. So it was kind of a guess and find out, but if you take enough class, you'll eventually find something you like.
I'm not sure that I'm a great example here, but sorry, cats are attacking. So I had no intention of being a scientist at any point in time when I was at the academy. Miss Wagner taught an amazing science class there, genetics. It was my first exposure to it, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. But Mr. Watson is the reason why I joined the Army. So I knew I wanted to serve my country, and I thought, hey, tanks are cool, so let's do that. The problem is that when I went to join, they said, wait a minute, you have a master's degree in genetics, so you're not going to drive tanks, you're going to do microbiology now. And I was like, oh, okay. So I would the only thing I can say is let the passion find you, because it turns out that the juxtaposition of a scientist and a military officer was extremely unexpected. I didn't even know it existed. And then that ended up being the thing that I absolutely dream and love. So that's I definitely never tried to hold myself to a particular task. I kind of just said, hey, where's the interesting thing? Let's go after that while keeping an eye on what I want, but also being open to other things.
Okay, thank you all so much for that. Another great question just came in, and they say, I think I noticed everyone has a PhD. Is an advanced degree required?
I think everyone
Depends
is shaking
entirely
their
what you
heads
want to do.
no.
Right.
Depends what you want to do.
Yeah.
In the government and the military, unfortunately, as much as I hate to say this, yes, your degree does open doors for you that otherwise wouldn't open, and it shouldn't be that way, because I know some of the most productive, amazing researchers I know don't have one. And I know people that have PhDs that, frankly, how? And it's just, it really comes down to like for me, the only reason I got one, I had no intention of going back to school. I was in the army, I was doing my dream, and they were like, well, in order to get promoted to your next rank of major, you got to have a PhD. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing that then. So it kind of, like, at least in my experience, I would say the answer to that question is no, but it helps.
Yeah, I would say it depends, just on what you want to do. I mean, where I'm working now, I mean, we don't hire, staff scientist level employees without PhDs, but I know plenty of people who don't want to do that much education, and they can still get you can do a bachelor's in science or a master's and still get a good job, but it's your ceiling's not going to be as high.
I'll chime in and say I am not working on a PhD, and I actively made that decision because I tried research and I really enjoy it, but I realized it wasn't for me, which is why I've only completed a master's. And of course, a master's is still like an advanced degree. And now I'm going into veterinary, which is another advanced degree. But I know plenty of people that are in like the conservation field, which I was interested in for a really long time, that got a bachelor's, and that's all they'll need for their career progression for at least the next like 10 to 15 years. Either in like working for the government and doing conservation, or working for a private company that does conservation related work. Like there's a lot of opportunities. Of course, I'm focused on biology and animals, but you can definitely get a bachelor's that contains just as much information that you might get in a bachelor's and a master's. It's just going to be like a different form. It definitely depends on like where you go and what you're interested in, but I think you don't necessarily need a advanced degree at all.
I quickly
There are a
well,
lot of,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead. Oh, there are a lot of opportunities in neuroscience if you just do a bachelor's as well, especially working as a lab tech or something. But I think it really depends on just how deeply you want to go into research. If you want to be like a research scientist and have your own lab, then you kind of need to go down the PhD path. But there are a lot of careers in industry and in universities related to research that you could do with just a master's or a bachelor's.
I knew that quickly in my time away from being in a teaching setting while I was at IBM that I did love research, but that I was going to need to have a PhD to be teaching at a college. And I had the opportunity, had been presented with a number of offers to interview different places that were more R1 type schools. We are at the College of Charleston, an undergraduate focused type of school. And so I knew that that was going to be the type of students I was going to want to be working with, as opposed to working with graduate students. So I knew teaching was going to need that PhD. And you can use that certainly to move on to industry as well. But I knew it was going to be required for the level of advancement that I wanted as a faculty member.
I was going to say, I agree with Matt's comment in the chat that just went in
Me
now.
too.
Don't get a PhD just for the sake of getting a PhD. Do it because you know that's what you're going to need.
I would almost, I don't want to argue, but I would almost say, I often tell my students the opposite of that. when I have interns that ask me that question. I think the only really good reason to get a PhD is because you love because you want to get a PhD. It's an incredibly rewarding experience. It's not going to make any financial sense. Like you'll 100% make more money by not getting a PhD, and just working that whole time. But if you love the research that you're doing, the best way to really dive into the research is to do that PhD. And if you don't love it and you don't want to do it, then it's not really worth it.
Thank you all so much. So to the person that submitted this next question, if I'm not presenting it the way you meant it, send me another message and let me know. But I think I've gotten the question correct. So for the panelists, what does a day in the life of your position look like, including the things you like the most and the things you like the least?
I'll start on that one. So get up, get the kids out the door, answer emails, go teach a class, try to figure out where I can do work in between, pick up the kids, come home, work some more. It's kind of all over the place. And again, as an undergraduate only type school in our department, I try to squeeze in research with students when it fits their schedule. That might be a Saturday or Sunday when we all have time to go do something that's going to take 6 to 8 hours where we can be in lab together to learn how to do what that science is. So I have to be flexible both, and that's a wonderful thing as being a faculty member, is having that flexibility, both with life and with students and with the requirements of teaching. But I definitely enjoy it, and it's been a great investment in my.
So as a PhD student, our days are kind of all over the place here. But for me, it's a lot of like being here sort of 9 to 5 or later. We do a lot of long days as students. So I'm in chemistry research. So I'm a lot of like hands-on, but also a lot of data analysis on the computer, a lot of writing. So once you get to that point where you're doing research every day and then trying to get out publications, you do spend a lot of time at school, at least in this sort of program. But it can be really rewarding still, because you can learn so much as a student. And at least like what I'm doing, I found what I love. So I always feel like there's a rewarding thing at the end of the day when I, find something new in my project, or get to mentor, one of the undergrads that I work with or anything. So it's pretty variable, but it's great to be a student. So if anyone wants to connect later about PhD or what it's like as like a current student or like at this school, that's something I'm always open to.
So my day typically goes down one of two paths. Either I'm in meetings a good chunk of the day and answering emails in between, or it's a lab day, in which case, I grab the 2 or 3 samples I'm going to look at, go down to the microscopy lab, and spend several hours taking images, doing my analysis, using a variety of different techniques. The only consistent downside of each day is the emails. They just never seem to stop.
So I would say that a caveat for me is that my average day before I retired versus after is dramatically different. So being an active duty Army major, very different, even though I'm working in the same field. I'm doing a lot of the same work. So it's, you can be in the lab at the bench doing experiments, or like in my current job, a lot of it is sponsor facing. So that means we do a lot of meetings with our government agencies that we work with and sit down and try to figure out what do they need, what can we help them out with, and then going and executing. And that's why I like the applied physics lab, because a lot of the work I did when I was in the Army was really great, but it was more theoretical. Whereas here, everything we do has to have a reason. Like, okay, that's great that you developed that, but now what's it for? And that's one of the things. So I think doing test and evaluation and execution, whether that's in the lab or whether that's out at a military exercise. It's very random. And I think that's kind of a terrible answer, but yeah.
As a current PhD student, my schedule also varies day to day, kind of like Haley was saying. Some days it's a lot of emails and meetings. Other days I'm TAing for neuroanatomy course. For the last month, I was writing this huge grant for the NIH. So I was just getting up really early in the morning, just writing all day. Um, but as for the research part, I do computational neuroscience, which has its advantages and disadvantages because all of my work is on my computer. So that means I can work from home, I can work from lab, I can work from anywhere. And so it's kind of convenient in that it's flexible, but it also means that I always feel this like pressure to like constantly check up on my code and like look at my data. Um, yeah, but I think it's one of the advantages of being a PhD student is the flexibility of your schedule, and pretty much you have a lot of say in what kind of activities you do. You get to choose, at least in my program, I got to choose which course I TA, what research projects I want to work on. So in general, most people I know are really excited about everything they're doing.
I'll do a quick follow-up after Sierra because like her, all of my work was on a computer, even though I was working with animals. It was all genetic work, which I felt the same type of pressure as a student where in general, there's always work that you can be doing. So you always are doing it. But specifically, I actually finished my master's in Colorado, even though my school is located in Indiana, and that was really great for flexibility. So that is kind of a plus of being a student is that you sometimes have that level of flexibility. And I had another point and I've completely forgotten it, but it's all right. Oh, also, sorry, yes. I was a master's student that was funded, which is a very unique position. Most masters are more geared towards graduate professional development. And so they're kind of like, they set you up for like a specific type of job or a specific type of field to go into. But mine was a funded master's, which do exist and are rare, but are really like a great opportunity if you're someone who maybe wants to do a PhD, but you're not certain if you can commit to like, in biology, they're typically like 6 or 7 years. So, or at least in my field, there's 6 to 7 years. So this was a great opportunity for me to see in 2 years if I really wanted to do a PhD. And I could talk more to any student that's interested in kind of like figuring out a PhD or master's. And I'd love to try to provide resources.
Thank you all so much. We do have a follow-up question to that. And what quality do you think is most important for someone going into the science field and research specifically?
Okay.
Go ahead, Kaylee.
Oh, sorry. Something that I've noticed a lot as a student, at least, is that you need to have some sort of passion for what you're doing, or some sort of like bigger reasoning behind it besides just you want a degree or you want to keep going to school or whatever. Because when you're in research, things don't always go the way you want, or there could be a lot of days in a row where things just go poorly and everything's hard and feels like the worst. So if you have that bigger reason of I really love this, I really want this kind of training, or this project means so much to me personally, then it can kind of help you keep going when you're doing, at least like for my field, like 5-6 years of research over and over, and maybe things don't work out a lot of the time. So kind of watching myself and my peers go through this, now that we're about 2 years in, just past our qualifying exams, everything, you can start to see that people who are more passionate are having more of a drive still at this point at about the halfway mark.
Yeah, my comment was going to be very much along those lines. Just don't be afraid of the failure. Embrace what it's trying to teach you. If you need to grab a pillow and go scream when you get home that one night because you feel like 6 months of your work just went down the drain, that's perfectly fine. Have whatever response you need to get through that day. But be mentally resilient. And, you know, like Kaylee was saying, just see what the big picture is for what you're trying to do and achieve. And if that isn't matching, then maybe reconsider what area you're in, who you're working with, those kinds of things, because there's always going to be a place for you if you have passion to do things. It's just about making sure that you know what that place and time are. And again, bring up that biology example. I loved the research in some ways, but man, that auger just smelled horrible. And I thought I can read this for days, but I just can't do the daily that's going to be required to do this. And it was time to move on. So yeah, for sure.
My comment was going to be similar in that I was going to suggest persistence, in that, you know, some days are really great, you get a really exciting result, and some days you realize, okay, the last 3 months or, you know, 6 months or a year were spent basically making no progress. Not sometimes due to your own fault, sometimes not due to circumstances way beyond your control. But just being persistent and keeping at it is kind of, I don't know, my skill that I say is needed.
Yeah, I was going to say almost the same thing. Just, you know, the most successful researchers I see aren't the people who are necessarily the most brilliant, who can come up to the answer to a problem the fastest. It's the people who just don't ever stop looking for an answer, right? So you're going to be wrong a lot. You just have to, you know, be persistent and stick with it and keep going until you figure it out.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of that, because as an undergraduate student, I definitely had this impression that like you should only go into something that you're really good at. So like the classes that you excel at, right? And there were a lot of professors that I took their classes and I didn't necessarily do great at, but because I was really interested in the material of the class, I worked outside of class doing research with them, or I later became like a teaching assistant in that class, even though I myself only got a B. It was through discussions with those professors and pursuing research that like really showed that I was interested in this, even though maybe I'm like a terrible test taker, which is very true for me. And so I think that's a common misconception, that you have to be brilliant or a genius in a certain area to go and pursue a graduate degree. And that is just not true. Like some of us are better at taking classes than other people, and that doesn't mean anything about your research qualities or what it means to do a graduate degree in that field.
Sorry, I have one more thing to add. So I jumped twice to the same question. But one thing that my PI talks about that I thought is really important is being okay with being uncomfortable. It helps a lot when you're wanting to progress your schooling, your career, anything. Be able to put yourself out there and talk to people you haven't met, you know, network, or, you know, move to some new school, try something that is really out of your comfort zone. It can be some of, at least for me, some of the most amazing big moves in life. So
Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone said. I think the most important things are resilience, persistence, and passion. And for me, I kind of like Gretchen was saying, like I wasn't sure if I could do the thing that I wanted to do, especially because I was switching from like music and foreign language, like humanities stuff, to science, like very rapidly. But what I found is that because when I talked to my professors that I was interested in working with, they could see that I was just really excited and that I was really willing to put in the work. And I think when people see those qualities in you, they will help you get to where you want to be no matter what. So I think those three things, resilience, persistence, and passion, are the most important in a research career. And no matter where you are starting out from there, people will help you to get to where you want to be.
Great, thank you all so much. This next question was actually pre-submitted by a student who I think is in seventh or eighth grade. And they said, that their science teacher has been teaching them how to collect data, and they find it to be really fun. So they want to know what businesses hire people to do research.
Pretty much all of them. Especially, I mean, if you're, and data science now is such a big field, like every major company has data science divisions that you can spend all your time analyzing data for the gas industry or for Walmart or for, Chick-fil-A or, every single company does it.
Yeah,
I
I'd
will
say oh, I was just gonna say, if you're a seventh grader who found out that you really love collecting data, your next mission is to find out what kind of data you like collecting the most, because you can do it with anything.
just as a from the perspective of having been in charge of and hiring lots of people over the years, if you really want to collect and analyze data, right now bioinformatics is hot. It's just where it's at.
I'd also say there's some really neat things I've seen on the publication kind of presentation side of science. People that love data also love helping you sometimes make those beautiful figures and pictures. And so there's actually some really cool artsy things that you can do with science and data as well. So don't be afraid of those if you find a passion for that. That is not my skill set. I need help from people to do things like that. But yeah, those kind of cool images that you see, or any of the neat generated types of structures and stuff, or proteins and things, like people are always writing cool code to do that analysis, to come up with those and make it communicate science effectively.
All right, thank you so much for that. Let's see, the next question that we have here is, how do you balance work family life? And this was pre-submitted by a parent.
And I guess I can say, since it's very different from my perspective, at least, it was very different between working in academia and national lab environment versus working in industry. At least the culture I was used to from the national labs was very much like everybody was just working all the time. And I mean, some people, I don't know, I had some people I knew who were, made very visible conscious efforts to make family time. And I was always impressed by that, but also, to be honest, like in some cases it could limit people because other I saw other people get promoted because they're like, well, that guy's in the lab 100 hours a week. So that's going to impress people. Once I went to industry, it was very different. Like, I mean, it's much more an expectation that everybody's going to go home at, 5 or 6 o'clock every day and go, spend time with your family, and, you come back the next morning. So it's a different, depending on where you're at, you're going to get really different attitudes about that.
I'd say it was definitely very different. Grad school was basically assume you're on call 24 hours a day. But then at the national lab career I have now, like if I work more than 40 hours a week, my supervisor is like, hey, are you doing okay? Do we need to, lighten your load a little bit? So there's very much, at least where I'm at, this like, okay, you do your 40 hours, go home, spend time with your family at the end of the day, have fun.
Yeah, I wanted to also just explicitly explain, in case people don't know, we're talking about like academia and industry. So academia is generally like working with universities at a research institution, whereas industry is when you're with a company. And one of the big distinctions, like Stephen and Wes mentioned, is that in academia, you don't really have set hours. So you kind of have to set your own boundaries, which gives you the flexibility that we've all talked about, but it also can make you feel like you're just on call 24 hours. whereas in industry, you typically have like a 40-hour work week. Um, so one of the like stereotypes I think of a PhD program is that you're just like constantly working. And I think in some programs it's like that. But my experience has been that I've been able to set boundaries pretty well and balance like my work and life pretty well. And I think when you're applying to PhD programs, that's something to definitely keep in mind because different programs have different expectations for how much you should work. But for me, I work often. I do some work on the weekends, but I have time to like go rock climbing or go to the beach or like do fun things pretty much every evening. So it's really up to you to set those boundaries, I think.
I'm actually really glad this topic came up. Work-life balance is, in my opinion and my experience, the most important thing to consider in any action that you take or do, because I spent almost 10 years active duty military, pretty much never taking any time off. I had the maximum amount of leave saved up when I was retired, and I would work sometimes 16 to 18-hour days back to back for a month or two, especially when you're overseas, stuff like that. And I really regret having done that. I don't think I'd be where I'm at if I hadn't, but it's not worth it in my opinion. I think one of the things that I did when I got out of the army and when I was looking at jobs is I would talk to the employees and say, hey, what's like here's on the books, right? But then off the books, what's the expectation? And there's places that said, well, they expect us to, work potentially up till 10 o'clock at night on sometimes and stuff like that. And I'm like, I mean, again, you do you, but my experience is it's not worth it. I really do think I can't emphasize enough the work-life balance is just really, really important.
I think also as a lot of us went to the academy, we're going to be naturally like really high achievers and people that are like highly driven. Like I know for most of my life, I'm 25 now, so probably until I was like 22, school was my work and my life and my hobbies were all school related. And that was just because like that was how it had been in high school and then at the academy and then in college, you're getting rewarded for doing that. So in the last couple of years, I've really tried to make more of like a life outside of work and school. And I think it's really important to try to find hobbies that aren't directly related to your work for a ton of reasons, including like mental health and also just like personal happiness and like achievement. And kind of piggybacking off of like what Sierra is saying and what Matt was saying, I think finding good mentors is a really important part of the research process. So I've been really lucky where all of my mentors also really valued having a good work-life balance and supported me in doing that. And so that was an aspect of research that I didn't think about as an undergraduate or a graduate student that much, but it really came out, especially like as I went remote in the last year, it's been really important to try to have someone who's supportive in me separating work from my life.
I would say as a people pleaser, it was really hard for me to initially start to say those no's. And I definitely let part of what I found to be the passion of being a professor and that classroom kind of joy that I get out, I let it kind of overtake what was the early years of my kids' childhood. And yeah, there definitely are times that I say that maybe wasn't the right choice at that moment, but we're doing great now. So it's hard to find that balance, but it's all individual. And you should be okay saying no, practice saying it in the mirror as much as you need to, because it'll be a strength for you one day.
Sorry about that. I couldn't get my mic to come back on. I have one final question before we move into the pieces of advice that you all would like to share. And that question is, I absolutely love this one. It's who has inspired you the most?
Uh, a guy that goes by the name of Brian Schooner. He definitely changed my life when I was at the academy. Sorry.
No, I agree with you 100%, Matt. Schoon made a big difference in everybody's lives. Fantastic, fantastic human being.
Just for some background, Schoon was an RA who had his wife and his kid there at the academy with us. And I went to the academy with a lot of the same assumptions that I think a lot of people like, we're going to excel, we're going to be the best of the best, whatever. And especially Schoon having Zach, his kid, there with us. And like he showed us that how important family is, and that you can still achieve your career goals, but also, you know, do what you need to do with your family and enjoy that life and have both. He was the one that really showed that to me, because up until then it was just like, hey, the work was the only thing that mattered. And Brian was definitely the guy that taught me that lesson. That's a lesson I wish I had learned and kept learning over and over. So
Thank you for mentioning his name, Matt. I had Kelly as one of my RAs, so I know that family quite well. I wanted to mention my grad advisor was one of my most fantastic inspirations. She was one of those women that just worked way too much and had a moment where there were limitations that came in for her, and she had to make a choice about what to do with her career and days and all sorts of things. And she pulled me aside at a number of different times and said, you know, I know that this is the example I'm setting, but it's worth considering whether this is how you want your life to go. And if you want it to go a different direction, you make that choice, you make priority those other things that you want to do. So she was a great example for me to be able to have that say no, pick the choice, to make the choice to go do something different. Not every faculty member's path is going to look the same. And she has been a fantastic mentor to me long term because of that, because she's always checked back in. She's actually visited us and come and talked here to our students about just life and how to be a scientist at that level. But she was a really fantastic inspiration for me to juggle things.
I'm going to say my mother-in-law, because she pursued a PhD at the age of 46. And I was just beginning my master's at that time, or well, I just graduated and was like pursuing my master's when she was finishing her PhD. And it was really kind of eye-opening when I was surrounded by people that were primarily young, although we had some like older, like 30-year-olds in our class. It really helped show me that like, okay, what I'm going to do for the next 4 years is going to be my career for that time. But if I really want to change it and I want to try something else, I can. It's just going to be difficult. And that's been really helpful to kind of shape my mentality as someone who really felt the pressure to, you know, what I do when I'm 15 is what I'm going to do forever, or what I'm going to do when I major in college is what I'm going to do forever. That just really helped change my perspective for flexibility and life career paths. And you can always find what you're passionate about at any time, and you can pursue it.
All right. Thank you all so much for sharing. Our time, as it does every single one of these programs, just goes way too fast. So now as we start to wrap everything up, it would be absolutely amazing if each of you could provide a word of wisdom or share a piece of advice with our participants today.
So I've kind of said this before already today, but it's something that's really sat with me. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and make connections, because that's something that can be really, really good for you if you're at, you know, as you get more into your career, maybe you're at a conference or you're wanting to get into undergrad research or something where you need to go talk to someone you don't know and go introduce yourself. It can be really uncomfortable, but it can help you a lot in the long term. So getting used to kind of feeling like that can really, really help with what you want to do. But also, since we're kind of wrapping up here, if anyone wants to talk about the kind of stuff a lot of us have kind of shared about being open with, communicating with current students. And I know if you're going to Ball State or in chemistry, it's kind of specific, but
I do still have connections there if anyone wants to reach out and talk about being able to do undergrad research in chemistry at Ball State.
I'll piggyback back off of that, as I have so often throughout this panel. I think talking to people about what I'm excited about has opened up so many opportunities for me. And even though it took that initial courage to reach out to that person, it has almost always been incredibly rewarding. And where I am today has only been through these like small emails that I send that work out. So I think, oh, don't be afraid to send that email. And don't be afraid to reach out for people for either like help or just like contact them. It takes a village to kind of grow your career. Also sleep. I did not prioritize sleep at all at the academy. And I love it and it's great. And you definitely need more than you're getting. So sleep and yeah.
So the advice I'd say is primarily be kind to those around you. Right now, at least the way a lot of science is going is less on the individual and more on the team science aspect. So you need to work, basically you need to be able to work with others and acknowledge that, you know, everyone has their own things they're going through. Everyone has their own backgrounds, you know, just be kind to each other.
And I would piggyback on that, Stephen, to say, don't be afraid of not knowing the answer. There are some amazing people out there that have skill sets that we don't, that we should be very open, as Gretchen and Kaylee were mentioning, to asking and saying, hey, I don't have this piece of equipment. And I think, you know, that MALDI would be great for analyzing these polymers. Why don't we try something with that? Could you get me a couple samples run on yours to figure something out? It's amazing what kind of connections and beautiful research come out from those kinds of things. And again, talking about an undergrad only school, we have to do things like that to be successful and have our students eventually publish work because we don't have access to those types of big things. So it's great. Be open and be willing to do that interdisciplinary collaboration.
I guess I would say, don't be afraid of failure. You know, as you go through your career, you're going to fail at things. And I know coming out of the academy, it sometimes seems like, oh, I'm going to be great at everything. But, you know, you're going to get rejected from schools and not get jobs you apply for. And a lot of times those open new opportunities that you aren't expecting. You just have to keep going in as close to the, you know, direction you want to go as you can. And it's never a straight line. You're going to zigzag. But just, you know, keep at it.
I would say at your age in high school, I feel that the most important thing is to just explore as much as you can and to like really follow your interests. So even if you have some interests that like you don't have any experience with, this is a great time to pursue that. And you can do that by reaching out to people, like cold emailing people, as many have suggested here. So just, I think, explore everything you can, take every opportunity, and then really follow what you find yourself to be most passionate about.
So Joe did tell us that we were going to get asked this question. So 3 succinct bullets. First, like Sierra just said, pursue your interests, not your expectations. I'm going to be a doctor. Why? Because I want to be a doctor. Okay. I'm really interested in cancer research. Got it. Right. Something that you'll hear anybody that's ever been in the military, the only wrong decision is not making one. So whenever you're unsure, make a decision. Even if it ends up being wrong, that's better than not making a decision. And then finally, and I think to me, something that really, and maybe this was unique to me, but get out of your comfort zone. If you are happy where you're at, push it. Does that mean, whether that means traveling? So traveling is a big one. I would say definitely traveling people should do. Explore things outside of your comfort zone, I think is the most important thing. That kind of got me where I'm at.
Did everybody have an opportunity to share? I kind of lost track. I got so involved in listening. All right, great. I want to thank you so much for giving your time today and sharing so much fantastic information and insight with all of our participants. To our participants today, thank you so much for joining us.
I think you went on mute at the end.
Thank you so much. So our next career exploration program is going to take place on May the 4th, and it's going to focus on film and podcasts. So we're going to have experts who are also Academy alums coming in, who have experience in TVs and movies, and they're going to talk about stunts and directing and producing and writing and so much more. Plus, hot off the presses here, we've added another career exploration program, and that was going to focus on performing and visual arts. So I encourage you to visit our website, which I've just dropped in the chat box. It's academy.bsu.edu/visit, and you'll be able to see those upcoming programs as well as a whole bunch of other programs. So again, I want to thank all of you so much for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.